This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Hey, this is Brian Peña. I always join the Vito podcast, the best podcast in the United States.
And Doc, as you know, one of our fine partners at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network is The Athletic, which is premium coverage for passionate sports fans. And listeners of this very episode of Tigers Talk can get 20% off. Yes, 20% off the first year of an annual subscription to The Athletic by visiting theathletic.com/DSP. And welcome to the latest, the freshest edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. I am your host, Vito Chirco, alongside my usual sidekick and broadcast partner in fun. That is the Doc from Doc and Jack, John Charles Macaroon. John, how are you doing, man?
Are we soon going to be talking about the first place Detroit Tigers?
Oh, my God, we're getting there. Maybe, John.
If they go on and defeat the Cleveland Indians, Game 2, Game 3 of the series here in Detroit, we'll be talking about the first place Detroit Tigers. And before the show started, obviously we have our pre-show meeting. I'm really disappointed in you, Vito. I come in, I'm a little bit excited. I just watched the Detroit Tigers destroy the Cleveland Indians. Nico Goodrum hits 2 home runs. The Tigers are able to hold on. Game 1 in the series versus Cleveland, an important series. And you're like, yeah, so what? They're going to lose anyway. They're going to lose out. They're going to be a bottom-dwelling team. I'm like, wait a minute. What are you talking about? Don't tell me, Vito, right now, you're sitting there and going, oh, don't worry about it, Doc. Let's poo-poo the fact that they're still in most of these games. They're competitive with their rivals and things like that. Don't just poo-poo the Detroit Tigers as they sit right now. The Tigers have played around 40 games, and they're just a little bit under 500. They're in a lot of games. They play interesting baseball, and I'll tell you this. I was at the bar on Monday. They're in the mix. I was able to watch the Vegas Golden Knights. I was able to watch Houston Golden State, but I was also able to watch on the screen the Detroit Tigers take on the Indians, and I was invested. I saw, Jimenez trying to get guys out, Shane Green a little bit of a struggle up and down trying to get guys out. Don't sit there and be like, oh, don't worry, don't be invested. We do a Tigers podcast, and you're just kind of taking some of the stance of like, well, I know they're going to finish out of the playoff contention, so I'm not going to be as passionate. Be a little bit passionate. I think you're missing out on an opportunity to watch a young group of kids play with no pressure.
I'll tell you this much right now. I don't give a rat's ass about the Tigers. Their supposed, hot ways, winning ways right now because they're only 2 games back of the Indians going into Tuesday night's game against the Tribe at Comerica Park. And we missed out, by the way. Monday night was Bark in the Park, Volume 1. We could have been there. We had talked about going. We didn't go. Tigers beat the Tribe. Luckily now, as a fan, I am proud of them being competitive and much more than we expected going into the season. But also, I think they look better right now, Doc, to all of us because of the fact that the Royals and White Sox are so shoddy. They are so bad, so lackluster, and even more bad and lackluster than we had expected coming into the season. And to a bigger degree, the Twins aren't as good as we thought. They've underachieved, and the Indians have as well, only at 500, 20-20 right now going into Tuesday night's game. And if the Tigers win the next 2, Tuesday and Wednesday, they do tie up the Indians. I mean, look at that. They would be tied with the Indians for first place in the American League Central Division, which nobody expected to happen. So you got to give them props, some credit for that. But what does it mean in the grand scheme of things for them to be in first place? If they do end up in first place, midweek or later in this week, does it really matter when we know the Tigers aren't going to be the team that finishes in first by the end of the season, Doc?
I think it's still entertaining to check into the Detroit Tigers because they're playing well. And the fun part is they're doing this without some key stars. You have Jeimer Candelario, significant wrist injury. He's missed time. Miguel Cabrera, significant piece. He's missed time. Nick Castellanos missed time with, after he got hit and they're on the wrist with a changeup. So they're still winning games despite significant pieces being out. And it provides us an opportunity to actually dig in and talk baseball. I feel like when you say you don't give a rat's ass, yes, it's likely that they're not going to finish probably atop the division. Yes, it's likely that the season's going to end where the Tigers are probably going to be under 500. But right now, at the time of this recording, they're in the midst of a series versus the Indians. They're playing decent, and that's all you can ask for. And yeah, you can take the stance, like many have who message us on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast, that are like, look, Well, the Tigers probably should be losing a bunch of games so they can get the number 1 pick. But if you are in year 1 of a rebuild and you have a bunch of talented dudes that maybe you can ship off, it's still nice to see them before they go. In the end, they still represent the community. They don the old English D. They still represent us. And even though many people are not going to be on the roster, it's still fun to watch. And they're not getting destroyed. Their run differential is pretty decent. I think they've only, basically maybe around -3 or -4 run differential. They're in a lot of games. They're competing. I'm not saying you have to raise your expectations. I'm just saying game to game, there's a lot to chomp into in terms of topics, in terms of players, in terms of value, in terms of draft potential, in terms of a lot of different things that you can sink your teeth into. So to say that you don't care, I think is a disservice. I think it's been fun. The one thing that you can give the Tigers credit for is they've kept the Doc invested, game in, game out. I'm watching.
Oh, good for you, Doc. Does anybody else care that you're watching right now?
Yes. I'd
rather have you be watching and be invested when the Tigers are a winning team. Now, I know it's good not to be a fair weather fan, so I guess you're not. You're watching the team. You're watching them play, go out there every single night and pretty much be competitive, be in ball games until the 9th inning. So that's good, where they're in ball games until the bitter end. But really, right now, they're benefiting from the fact that the Indians haven't really taken off. They haven't looked like the best team of this division yet. Now, you got to believe that once they get going, they will be a better than 500 ball club. And by the way, even though the Tigers are playing so great, you say they're so exciting and fun right now to watch. Well, guess what? They're still under 500. They're still not 500. That's the point. So we got to bring that up. They're 18-22 for a reason. They're not 500 because they're a team that's probably they're going to finish below 500. And now, when you look at the runs scored, runs allowed, it is hovering around 500. So if they do finish there, maybe Ron Gardenhire deserves AL Manager of the Year. And I had a buddy, Brennan Kudla, who's been on this podcast before, mention that very note, which I hadn't ever thought of. But he'll garner votes at least. He won't win the award, but he could garner votes. Think about that. And that's another fascinating, interesting topic to kind of dive into a little bit here, is that Gardy has done an incredible job. I've got to give him a lot of credit because you and I both doubted him coming into the season, and we really thought, well, why did Ausmus get the job when he did? Why didn't Gardy get it in 2014 when Ausmus got it? Because Gardy would have been walking into a winning ball club, a team that had veterans, a veteran core that could win right then and there. This team isn't ready to win, but I think almost he is that guide and mentor to these younger ball players and has moved them in the right direction. So I like that Gardy is the manager, and I almost like that veteran touch that he delivers game in, game out to these young, relatively young Tigers at least.
Yeah, Ron Gardenhire has come in and basically brought in a stabilizing force. You see the Tigers go out there, and when there are some issues, they get addressed, they are looked at, and they are getting resolved, which is good. I feel like at the very least, the players respect the manager. They're going out there and competing game in and game out, despite the fact that they're limited. I mean, there's a long list of injured players, and they're going out there with guys like Francisco Liriano. Mike Fiers is going out there doing some things. And so you have to give him a little bit of credit for hanging in there and doing some things. And it's nice to see as well, Vito, some unsung heroes emerge. You got Pete Kozma trying to come out there and resurrect his career. Nico Goodrum, an upper-age player, mid-20s. No spring chickens on the Detroit Tigers are making some contributions. And so I know many people will just look at it and evaluate these talented individuals and say, well, what can we get for them? They're not going to be part of a long-term rebuild. But at the same time, don't discount the fact that there is some value in the fact that maybe the Tigers are taking an us-against-the-world mentality and going into these contests with some edge, with some grit, and there's something for that, as well as give credit to those that are getting called out in the media. Remember when we spoke to Jim Leland and we discussed the Jose Iglesias situation? Obviously, Ron Gardenhire talked to him. At the time, he wasn't batting that consistently, and in the field, there were questions about his effort. He had to talk with Gardenhire, and all of a sudden, he's had a good week. He's had a rebound week. He's been productive. He's been on base, and it looks like the talk was fruitful. And that's all you can ask for.
They had the talk. I'm glad they finally had the talk.
They had the talk.
By the birds and the bees.
And after the talk, productivity. That's all you can ask for, is that a guy like Jose Iglesias contribute to the team. Don't take anything personally. And when you have a disagreement, speak your mind. And when you get talked to by the manager, go out there and produce. Don't you think a lot of guys are producing and doing some things, as well as guys that we maybe had thought of and hoped would contribute, like a Jacoby Jones? Dude's becoming a star right before our eyes. People are really invested in Jacoby Jones. He's a wild man. He's a guy with energy, and people are becoming invested, and quickly, Jacoby Jones is becoming a fan favorite right before our eyes.
Iglesias had the talk with Gardy about the birds and the bees, and he's been productive since. Wink, wink.
Yeah, he has,
Very productive.
Right? Very productive.
We're talking about on the field, we are, right?
Maybe off the field, too.
Maybe off the field, too. Who knows? Maybe Gardy helps out in that. realm of things as well. So we don't know. But anyways, moving
Actually,
on.
it's kind of funny. Could you imagine Jose Iglesias and Ron Gardenhire going to a club, going to the club?
Gardy's helping him out.
Exactly,
He's a man of many talents.
Ron Gardenhire could be an epic wingman.
He could be.
You know what?
He's a mentor in more than one way.
He's a mentor, right? Would you take Ron Gardenhire to the club and...
Can he be my mentor, too?
Exactly.
In so many words, a wink, wink, once again, and help me be productive off the baseball diamond? Because, I play co-ed softball, so I do maybe need some help on the diamond as well, but I made a stellar play, by the way. You can even ask my brother. We could dial him up right now, and he would back me up, not just because he's my brother. And Nick Schmiegel would actually back me up. So if he's backing me up, I made a nice play on the infield at shortstop Monday night in my co-ed softball league. Anyways, moving on to guys that do it professionally in the major league level for the Tigers. How about the catchers of late and what they've done hitting the baseball dock? James McCann in the month of May, 302, 806 OPS. John Hicks in the month of May, 354 batting average, 947 OPS. How about that? 5 multi-hit games in the month of May after doing none of that in the month of April. So Hicks has hit, McCann has hit, the unsung heroes that really weren't expected to do much, even though I liked Hicks coming into the season. But I made fun of James McCann. I've got to admit that. I made fun of him and his hitting ability. He's really picked it up in the month of May, so maybe Gardy had a talk with him, maybe, brought him to the side and had a talk with him about the birds and the bees, and that's why McCann's been more productive since. Well, he has a wife, though, and a kid, so I guess he has been productive in that realm of things, though. He doesn't need the help of Ron Gardenhire. Maybe somebody else does, like Jose Iglesias, maybe like me as well. Maybe Gardy can take me out and show me a few things, show me the ropes, I guess, of this and that, and show me around and teach me a few things. I think I could use it, too, the advice off the baseball diamond, softball diamond, I guess, too.
What would you ask him?
Well, Ron, how did you come to be with your wife? How did this all happen? Did you have some fun growing up? What do you know about growing up with the women that maybe could help me out with the women off the baseball diamond, off the softball diamond? But in the grand scheme of things, Gardenhire, all joking aside, has done a really good job with this year's ball club and has helped them achieve, I think, results that nobody or very little amount of people really expected for the Tigers to do.
Exactly, Vito. On the diamond, I think the fans, where do you think they lie in terms of their belief in this team? Because you have some fans that are messaging us at Detroit Podcast. They're saying, look, maybe this team has a chance to contend, at least be around. And then you have the other fans that are like, no. This team is probably gonna unload. Maybe Michael Fulmer, maybe Nick Castellanos, maybe Victor Martinez just gets let go because of his, right now he's viewed as a black hole in that lineup.
Who is?
Victor Martinez.
Oh, okay, yes.
He's viewed as a black hole. It's bad right now. It's not good.
Yep.
But you are evaluating this team, and you're saying, you know what? The fans are, I know, staying away in droves. The attendance has not been great. That's why you have all these gimmicks like, bark in the park and things like that, and bobblehead days and trying to get people, I guess. And I think one of the things that was awesome, if you had a chance to go, was they let you stay for both games. If you had a ticket to one of the games, I think, versus Seattle, you had an opportunity to stay for both with your ticket.
On Saturday. You're right. It was a traditional baseball doubleheader, too. Back-to-back games. Half an hour in between the games. So that was really cool, too.
2 for the price of 1. They should do more of that.
Like every single game when they have a doubleheader, at least, right?
Exactly.
That would be nice for the fans.
But when you look at it, where do you think the majority of fans lie with the Tigers? Do you think the fans are into the club? Do you think the fans really are just kind of watching with no expectations, having a good time with it? Or do you say, you know what? The majority of fans are upset that the Tigers are winning because of the fact that when you start a rebuild, you want to have the highest draft picks possible, and winning lets you go down to 7th or 10th. And what really kind of prospects can you get at that level when you've had really high draft picks in the top 5 in the last few years? Just lose a bunch, and the purpose and objective, which I said early in the year, they really only had one objective, which was to earn the number 1 pick.
To lose then, right? And they're not doing that enough.
And they're veering
so
away from that.
Yeah.
So where do you think the majority of fans lie in terms of their thoughts on the Detroit Tigers?
The majority of the fans, I don't think, are disgruntled. They're excited about the ball club, how competitive it has been. But I think more the intellects and savants when it comes to baseball knowledge and acumen, like myself. Okay, not really. But I know something, right? I know something to be on this podcast and spewing all this BS here and there week to week for Tigers Talk. I was so disgruntled the other night when I saw them win Monday night against the Indians. I put my fist into the wall, punched the wall, put a dent into that wall. But no, I think there's some fans, I didn't really do that. I couldn't do it probably. Well, maybe I should try. Let's see, what? We'll do it in this podcast studio. See if I can do it. But all joking aside on that front, too, I think a lot of us that really know what the Tigers are made of this year and what they should be doing are unhappy to a certain extent, but also happy once again with the fact that they have been, even when they're going down in defeat, Doc, they're being competitive. They're looking excited. They're looking energetic. They're giving a fight, showing spirit and fight. So I like that about the Tigers this year, where last year, man, do you remember down the stretch, the second half of last year, once they dealt all those guys, They were miserable. They were the worst club in baseball, and that's why they got the number 1 pick in this year's amateur draft. So we hope they can get the number 1, 2, or 3 overall pick in next year's amateur draft too. But really, in the grand scheme of things, you pick a number 1 doesn't always mean you're going to find the grand prize of the draft. The best of the best and the best talent in the draft. You can seep lower in the draft order and get as good of talent, if not better, as you go along in the first, second, third. There's 40 plus, 50, 60, 70 rounds in the Major League Baseball amateur draft, which people don't really realize, and I've just started realizing myself. So there's so many more rounds than just the first round, and so much more importance to just the first round in the Major League Baseball amateur draft. So really, you got to do your scouting. You got to know who's available in the rounds that are later on in the draft. And if you do know that, you can really pick up good, talented ball players that can make up your farm system, can make up your ball club at the Major League level as well in the future. So once again, it's not as important picking number 1 year to year, but really just picking the right players, right? The right players to fill up your farm system that you can develop, that can be homegrown, and then that can contribute at the major league level one day in 3, 4, or 5 years from now, let's say, Doc.
Before we interview our guest, Mike Feld, making a return appearance to the Tigers Talk podcast, how many games do you think do they take down now versus the Cleveland Indians? Do they win all 3? Do they win 2? Or is the one game an aberration and the Cleveland Indians come in and they look interested and spank the Tigers the remaining 2 games of the series?
I'm going to say 2 because of just what you noted there, that they didn't really seem interested game 1 Monday night. So I'm going to say they take 2, even though I almost thought about being the pessimist, the ultra pessimist.
All right,
and saying
Tigers
1.
win the
I'm going to
series.
say 2. They win the series, 2 out of 3 at Comerica.
Okay, they'd be 1.5 games out of first place in that realm. So, okay, Vito, good for you. I do think that the Tigers have an opportunity to do well in front of the home fans, and at least the weather's been nicer. More fans have been out there to the ballpark, and the Tigers are playing a decent brand of baseball. In the second half of the podcast, we'll definitely peek into a couple players, get to know them, Nico Goodrum, Jacoby Jones, and things like that, contributing players, as well as Vito has his notebook ready to bring us news and notes from around the world of Major League Baseball. And he'll discuss, obviously, a major suspension that was announced on Tuesday. We'll get his thoughts on that in the second half of the podcast. What are 1 or 2 things you are looking forward to getting out of Mike Feld?
Well, he called the GLIAC baseball tournament at the Corner Ballpark over the weekend, so we'll talk to him about that broadcasting opportunity for himself. Also about what to make of the Tigers. What does he make of the Tigers right now going into their, 40 games in now, too? So that's like a good indicator of where your club stands and how good it's going to be the rest of the way, too.
All right, let's dial up Mike and get him on the podcast.
And now joining us on this week's episode of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company via Vito's VIP line is a Wayne State Sports Information Director and former 97-1 The Ticket producer, Mike Feld. Mike, how are you doing?
Excellent, Vito. Good to talk to you once again. A little bit different time. We were talking about the end of the season last year, and now we're kind of going the other direction here.
And now we're at the 40-game mark. So, I mean, they're 2 games out of first place, Mike. And before we dive deep into the Tigers talk, though, because we have to talk about it, it's Tigers talk, obviously. You and I, Mike, we like the Tigers, got to talk about it. But first, what you did over the weekend was pretty huge, in my opinion, calling the GLIAC baseball tournament at a great ballpark, the former site of Tiger Stadium, on the corner of Michigan and Trumbull, now the Corner Ballpark. So how the heck did you get this opportunity to call the GLIAC baseball tournament, and how did it go for you?
Well, it's kind of an interesting story. I was going to help out on the other side of things. I was technically supposed to run the scoreboard, which is not installed yet. There's a lot of ongoing construction down there at the Corner Ballpark, so we'll see when they finally actually get that scoreboard up there. So I was kind of out of a job, and we had our broadcast team, Kevin Breckmacher, our play-by-play guy during the basketball season, had been hired out to do the GLIAC tournament by the conference, and he was looking at it, and he realized that we had 10 games in 4 days, and he was like, I can't do this all by myself, so he asked if I would join him, and next thing you know, we were quite the duo there, calling games back and forth. I was doing 3 innings at a time, and I've never called baseball before, so I can tell you this, as a broadcaster, that was a dream for me, especially the debut at the Corner Ballpark at the corner of Michigan and Trumbull, and I can tell you what, it was a long weekend, it was a tiring weekend, but I wouldn't trade it for the world.
So what else have you called before, Mike? Mike Feld on the line with us. What other sports have you called in the past?
I had worked at Detroit University calling men's and women's soccer and men's and women's lacrosse, and that was it too. I kind of went into that blindly. I've never had any formal training in the art of play-by-play, so I've been kind of given a bunch of crash courses, and I could tell you this, if anyone is curious about it, wants to get into it, find a way to call a local game or a high school game, because if you're a sports fan, it's a trip. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, but it's an adventure.
So very good, Mike. Maybe you and I on the call of the game one day. I mean, I would love to do it. I think, hey, we're buddies. You know Adam. I know Adam Bouton from Detroit Mercy. Or maybe you and Adam. I don't know. You and Adam or you and I. Maybe we'll make it happen one day, you know?
Adam might be a little microphone shy, but I'll tell you what, you and I know how to do this. We'll rock it.
We'll rock it indeed. And how about GLIAC baseball? Now, Northwood defeated Davenport 5-4 in the championship game. That was the number 1 seeded Northwood team, number 2 Davenport squad in the GLIAC. I mean, what do we make of GLIAC baseball?
You know what? It's a good brand of baseball. I'll tell you this much. There were scouts out there. There's a pitcher from Davenport, Grant Wolfram, who is about 6'8", and they love his movement. So there were about, 15, 16 scouts that were out there to watch his opening start back on Friday. And there's a Wayne State pitcher, Jared Toby, who is also getting some looks. So about maybe 8 or 10 of those scouts hung around for his start. I saw the Reds down there. I saw the Dodgers. I saw the Yankees. So, I mean, you want to dismiss it immediately because you're thinking Division II baseball, and I know in these parts, Division I baseball is not even that popular. When you think about baseball, you think guys go straight from high school to the minors or will go to the South and play in the SEC. But don't sleep on GLIAC baseball. If you're a fan of baseball and you like the college aspect of it, there's a lot of good games being played. Obviously, a lot of games locally with Wayne State and Grand Valley State and Davenport on the west side. And go about an hour north, you got Northwood and Saginaw Valley. So there's a lot of good competition around here.
So before we get into Tigers talk and talking about the Tigers at the 40-game mark, what are you up to these days?
Working at Wayne State in the sports information department, and obviously trying to get back into broadcasting, calling some games, and just, really trying to continue working at the craft. I'm a big sports fan and always trying to find new avenues. So, we'll see where the path takes me.
Well, Mike, you were talking about, exciting baseball at the D1 level, D2, GLIAC baseball, and how there's not a lot of excitement or coverage towards it, even at the D1 level, these big universities, big programs like U of M, Michigan State. And, now we're trying to get excited about the Tigers. And now I guess more and more people they're 18-22 at the 40-game mark and 2 games out of first place in the American League Central Division. Not a lot of people expected that to be the case. I mean, what do we make of these Tigers right now, in your opinion?
It's kind of a double-edged sword because they're 2 games out in clearly the worst division in baseball. So you got to take that with a little grain of salt. I will say this, though. They definitely surprised me, especially when you look at those lineups, some of the lineups they put out in some of these games. They're like, this is a Toledo lineup. This is a not good Toledo lineup. I don't know any of these names. But they've scrapped out some wins. They've looked like a team that's invested and engaged. And when they hired Ron Gardenhire, a lot of people didn't like the hire because they thought that he wasn't the manager of the future or, wasn't a big sabermetrician. He was kind of old school. But don't forget, he was hired in Minnesota as a guy who was there for a long time to tutor young guys and to bring a team that was on a limited budget to develop. And I think that's what you've got to remember here is this team is not built to win necessarily. So when you mention that they're just a couple of games out of first place, through the 40-game mark, appreciate the fact that that's a testament to Ron Gardenhire that's got a bunch of young kids, guys that maybe weren't necessarily major league ready, and now all of a sudden they're playing really good baseball because he knows how to develop young talent. And that's going to be huge for this team in the future.
And he's getting the most out of this, so-called lackluster talent. And really it is lackluster talent for the most part. And with the injuries, and like I saw Sunday's lineup Mother's Day, and I tweeted out something about it, that this game, that lineup was horrible. I mean, you looked at it, it looked like a AAA Toledo Mud Hen lineup. It really did from top to bottom. And you have guys like Dixon Machado, Nico Goodrum, even Iglesias not the greatest hitter, John Hicks, James McCann, all these guys that maybe aren't the best hitters who right now have contributed at least a little bit. Jacoby Jones as well. Mikey Ma took back up with a big league club. And then I look at these old, Tiger teams from the mid-'90s to mid-2000s that weren't good either. And how do you think this year's squad stacks up with those teams from the mid-'90s to the mid-2000s that were, equally bad, if not worse, in my opinion?
Well, I guess the big difference here is the talent that you had back in the 90s, they just completely missed on. Randy Smith was not a great GM. He didn't know how to evaluate talent. He didn't know how to scout. He didn't know how to draft. He didn't know how to sign free agents. It looks like there's a core of players here that you can actually live off of. I mean, Jeimer Candelario is a guy that they're obviously high on. Nico Goodrum was a guy that, I didn't know who he was until opening day, and it looks like he's a guy that might stick around all season, various parts that contribute with the team. There's a lot of guys here that are going to be very valuable to the future mold. You mentioned Jacoby Jones, that's another one. along with a guy like Nick Castellanos, still very young. They've obviously moved him back out to the outfield. So it's going to be interesting to see how they move him along if he's still here. Michael Fulmer has been involved in trade talks as well. Those are a lot of guys that you can build around. And that was the difference between the 90s teams where you had guys like, Jeff Weaver and Matt Anderson. And you couldn't necessarily build around those type of players. I mean, they thought Fernando Vina was going to be the savior, stuff like that. So you really look at this team and you hope that Al Avila and the scouting department, especially with the first overall pick this year, can continue to find good talent, develop it, and take this team in the future and get them on the right track a lot quicker than maybe what the 90s and the early 2000s held.
And Mike, you're right. They have building blocks, finally. So this isn't like the most lackluster ball club in all of Major League Baseball history. And in this year as well, there's worse teams, and there's a lot of worse teams now, too. I mean, you see like 7 clubs or so that look like they're tanking. I mean, they're bad intentionally. They're going for the number 1 overall pick next year, or at least for one of those top picks in next year's amateur draft. And, back to those building blocks, you already kind of spoke of them, but Jeimer Candelario, Michael Fulmer, Nicholas Castellanos. Do you think they're going to be long-term Tigers, or are they bound to get dealt?
That's an interesting question. I was surprised last week when I heard that Michael Fulmer was going to be scouted because the Tigers are looking to move him. I don't necessarily know what the benefit is there unless you're trying to flip him for 3 or 4 prospects. But you have in Michael Fulmer. I think you use him as a building block, especially when you're kind of stuck with the Jordan Zimmermann situation. You're trying to get rid of that contract. Victor Martinez will be coming off the books after this year, and Miguel Cabrera, I don't think is going to be here long term, although you are committed to him. So I think if you can get the bad contracts off the books, you want to keep a guy like Michael Fulmer, who is young, explosive, a guy that you can have take charge of your rotation for now. But, I don't know. The Tigers think that they can get a lot of value for a younger player. I think Nick Castellanos is a more interesting name because he is someone that you can float out to the trade deadline. He's a little bit older than these younger guys, so it would be more beneficial to them as they develop Major League veteran now to go and try and get prospects. But if I'm a fan, from the fan perspective, I'm hoping they hold on to all these guys because, like I said, you're hoping that they're going to fix this and make the rebuild much shorter than what we expect, because this looks like, or at least last September when I talked to you last week, it looked like this was going to be a 4 to 5 year process. I'm looking at this now thinking 2 years, they could be competitive. I mean, heck, they're competitive now.
Yeah. I'm hoping 3 to 4 years. As a fan, you're hoping for the best case scenario. But some people were saying 4 to 5 years. I always kind of lean towards 3 to 4, and maybe now it is 2 to 3. And because of Michael Fulmer staying on board, Nicholas Castellanos, Jeimer Candelario, who I think is a real deal at third base, but now he's hurt. Fulmer's dealt with elbow issues in the past. He's kind of looked shaky of late, but he's a sexy right-handed arm with that great velocity, great stuff. He's your ace of the present and the future, a guy that you want to build around. But then you do hear of these trade rumors circulating and coming up here and there. And recently, too, John Morosi tweeted out that teams have been calling on Michael Fulmer, and the Tigers were taking calls on him. But in my opinion, taking calls on somebody like Michael Fulmer, Mike, is just like, day to day. It's something that happens on a common, everyday basis. What is your take on that?
Yeah, and it's really interesting because I feel like a guy like John Morosi's really got a pulse in the situation. He's well versed in baseball operations with many scouts and many front office people. So I don't doubt the report. But yeah, I do kind of lean on the fact that I'm sure if you could, inject some truth syrup into Al Avila, he would tell you, well, yeah, I'm going to take a call on any player at any time. I mean, they traded Justin Verlander last year. I know he was older and had a bad contract, but they're going to take calls on anyone they can right now, especially when they're not in win-now mode. They're thinking about how they can develop this for the future, and they're not built to win. So I guess in a way you kind of have to see, because it's a team that's really desperate for a starting pitcher, and as we've seen, there are a lot of teams that have incomplete rotations. If they've got 2, 3 top-of-the-line prospects, they're going to dangle them in front of Al Avila's face. I mean, you owe it to your fans and to your organization to take a phone call, right?
I think so. I think, there's calls even being made for Mike Trout. I mean, you're taking calls on him, maybe even Ohtani, Derek Jeter in the past, all these great players in the past and the present. I think GMs, will take calls, and it's not a bad thing just taking the call. It doesn't mean you have to, pull the trigger on a deal involving the guy, and it might not mean that Michael Fulmer even gets dealt this year or ever. He might be a Tiger for the long-term future, that is. But you still can take the call, and I don't think that's a very big deal either. And now pivoting a little bit to a widely popular game that's played on here very, very often, Big Vito's over-under. I think it's like nationwide now, worldwide popular. I mean, everybody talks about it. Not really. But over under on wins, and 67.5 is the win total I'm going to give to you. Over or under on that total this year from the Tigers?
Begrudgingly, right now, I'm going to go the over. And if you would have talked to me in, I don't know, late March, I would call my present self crazy for saying that. But I just think this team is playing better than what we thought. They're going to have some lumps. They're going to have some, setbacks once the season kind of hits that middle of the road, June, July, those long months where guys are banged up, but they're probably tired of playing 9 innings for, 26, 27 days out of a 30-day month. So I think there's definitely going to be some losing streaks coming. With that said, though, I think this team's going to play really hard. Obviously, these guys have nothing to play for except for their teammates and for their respective careers. I mean, Miguel Cabrera can check out whenever he wants, and we can't do much about it. Victor Martinez can check out. I think he has the last couple of years, and nobody can do anything about it. Nico Goodrum's a guy that needs to scrap out every at-bat because his major league career could end tomorrow if he doesn't play successfully. So I think these younger guys who have something to play for, which is not only pride, but their own reputation, they're going to play really hard till the end, and I think that's going to scrap out a few more wins, so I'm going to take the over.
Very good. I'll allow you to do that. I don't think you're crazy. I don't think it's like the case where you didn't take your crazy pills or something. So I think you're all right, and I'll allow that to happen. Now, before I let you go, Mike, here, what is your stance on the legalization of sports gambling and actually how it affects somebody, a big name from the past, the all-time hits leader, in Pete Rose, a non-Hall of Famer because of gambling on his team when he was managing the Reds from 1984 to 1989? Do you think it even helps him out his candidacy for the Hall of Fame one day, or do you think there's still zero shot and really zero effect on his candidacy when it comes to the Hall of Fame?
Well, I think at the end of the day, we're all gamblers. I mean, everybody has some kind of NCAA pool or fills out a bracket or does something. So as a fan, it's going to help all of us out as a fun little thing. I hope that too many people don't get caught in the addiction of it because it'll be out there. It'll be more accessible. As to your question about Pete Rose, here's the thing. I thought that he should have been in a decade ago. And this is a personal opinion that it is just mind-boggling that you can punish a guy, you can banish him from baseball, but to tell me that arguably the greatest hitter of all time is not in a Hall of Fame doesn't make sense to me. If you want to put him in and not let him have his day in July and have the podium ceremony and all that, fine. Put his name up there, put him on a plaque, don't say anything about it, just put it in the corner and let it be up there. That's the way I look at it. So that being said, because I think that there hasn't been much openness to this, I know Rob Manfred, when he took over, met with Pete Rose and decided they weren't going to put him in yet. I don't think it's going to change. I know Pete Rose is still out there admittedly gambling, out there at Vegas hotels doing autograph sessions and all of that stuff. So I just think that that's not going to change at least anytime soon. I think it might be a situation where they'll wait till he has passed if they actually get him in, as unfortunate as that is. But I could talk for days about my issues with the Hall of Fame and getting guys in. I think it's a shame that Barry Bonds isn't in and Roger Clemens, and even if they did cheat, baseball didn't do anything about it. If you don't want to celebrate it, that's fine. But to tell me that Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, Pete Rose, those guys aren't Hall of Famers, it's just mind-blowing.
Well, you put an asterisk on their plaques, you could say. If they make it to Cooperstown one day, Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, as they stay on the ballot longer and longer, they might get in. And they were cheaters. They used PEDs. But if they get in, you could say, hey, Pete Rose deserves to get in as well. But the thing is, he's never been apologetic. He's not that sympathetic figure. And he is what he is. He's still in Vegas making money off of autographs. He's still a gambler. We know that much. He's never fully apologized or admitted to anything that he did. And because of that, he's not going to get in. I just don't see him getting in ever. And we could really have a deep, in-depth discussion, I think, one day on the Hall of Fame and who should be in, who's gotten in, who shouldn't be in. But we'll leave that topic for another day on Tigers Talk. All right?
I'm here for you. Like I said, I can go on all day about those guys and how I think it's a shame that you're going to tell me some of these guys aren't Hall of Famers. You just said Pete Rose isn't apologetic. Trust me, there are plenty of not good people that are already in the Hall of Fame, so...
Yeah, oh yeah, that aren't great character people, right, off the field. But once again, a topic for another day, and you're a great character guy, though. I can say that much as we end this week's segment here on Tigers Talk. I appreciate the time, Mike.
Vito, you were just as good of a man, if not better. I appreciate the time.
Great to hear that, man. Nice talking to you as usual, and we'll talk again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Vito.
Yep, thank you. And back here on Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company, that was Mike Feld, formerly of 97.1 The Ticket. Now, he co-produced the morning show for a year and a half or 2.5 years at The Ticket, so you can look him up in his bio on Wayne State's athletic department website, and you can see that he helps out now with these different programs at Wayne State as an SID and does a lot with media relations. And he's a guy with this expertise as a broadcaster, as a writer, can really do it all, well-versed. And he knows his sports and knows his baseball, especially, Doc.
All right, let's take our first time out. Come back. We'll highlight some players that had some good weeks, and we'll get to Vito's notebook in the second half of this podcast.
Sounds like a plan. We'll do it after this quick commercial break. And Doc, as you know, one of our fine partners at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network is the Detroit Sports Commission. And I can go on and on, days and days, talking about how I love Marty Dobeck and the Detroit Sports Commission. I've been so grateful for them, all the opportunities they have graced me with and given to me, and recently now doing some stuff for the Detroit Metro Convention and Visitors Bureau. And just nonstop, I can talk for days and days about what they do and what they've done for the Metro Detroit area, bringing in tons of marquee events since 2001. And these are national, international, amateur sporting events and the finest sporting events out there. Completely. Trust me. And with all that being said, you can follow the Detroit Sports Commission today and follow it every day on Twitter and on Instagram at DET Sports. And make sure to check out their very fine website at DetroitSports.org. And Doc, as you could tell, I love Mike Feld as well. I love Marty Dobeck. I love you as well, obviously. I'm going to show you some love as well. But, we could talk for days and days about the Hall of Fame and who should be in, who shouldn't be in. And now there has been this legalization of sports gambling nationwide where the states can decide whether or not they want to pursue, the legalization of itself in their respective states. So we'll see if Michigan ends up doing it. We know New Jersey's going to do it. Really, Chris Christie got the ball rolling. Remember, the former governor of New Jersey. And now there's been this little discussion here and there on Sports Talk Radio and on Twitter, online, all over the blogosphere about, does this help out, hurt, or just not affect at all Pete Rose and his Hall of Fame candidacy? And I would say since he got fired from Fox Sports in 2017 for some alleged sexual allegations with an underaged woman back in the 70s or something when he was married with 2 kids and whatnot. Well, since that all came out and he really hasn't been apologetic for what he did, Doc, I don't think he ever gets in. And really, at this point, I think he shouldn't get in.
I can respect that. Many people will disagree with that point. It will be decided, and I think other people who disagree with that will say that he's been given multiple chances to not lie, to be forthright, and he's continued to lie and do things that he's not supposed to do. And that's why probably just based on that, the fact of the matter is that multiple commissioners have given him chances, and he's failed. So I disagree with Mike Feld in that I just think that when you've been given chances and you've been given the outline as to what to do and you don't follow it, too bad. You don't need to be in the Hall of Fame.
Adios.
He doesn't need to be in the Hall of Fame. So, in your opinion, who do you think had the best week this week for the Detroit Tigers? Was it Nico Goodrum blasting some home runs, 3 on the season? Or is it Jacoby Jones, who's kind of done a lot of things to provide energy, a spark for the Detroit Tigers, a fan favorite emerging, and this is an individual that has been contributing and has kind of earned his way, forced his way to be an everyday player for the Detroit Tigers. Which couple players had decent weeks, and who had the best week this week for the Tigers?
You could say James McCann. You could say John Hicks. You could say Nico Goodrum. You could say him because of his Monday night performance against the Tribe. The first-place Tribe still, 2-time reigning AL Central champion Cleveland Indians, who aren't playing like it so far. They're still the class of the division. I mean, you know that. And by default, they might just win the division because, as Mike Feld said himself during his segment with us on Tigers Talk this week, Doc, the AL Central is the weakest division in all of baseball. You can argue that very easily right now, and it looks like that might stay the same the rest of the way this season because of non-Tigers ball clubs, too, in the American League Central. Most notably the White Sox and the Royals. They're not very good ball clubs. They might finish in 4th and 5th, respectively. And I don't know who's going to finish in 5th out of those two. Tigers, I don't think will. I don't think they're going to end up in 5th place, at least. Could they finish in 4th? Yeah, it's still early on in this season, but they're not going to finish in 2nd. I think more and more likely is that they finish in 3rd, and for who had the best week, you could say the catchers. The catcher in first base position, and first base without Miguel Cabrera. So how about that? No Miguel Cabrera, and they're still hitting for power. Hicks, McCann, OPS-wise, Goodrum out of nowhere. Did nothing with the Twins last year. And now he's hitting for power. 2 home runs in one game. Is he going to really sustain it? We can't really bank on that being the case. And that's why we know, like I did the over-under, Big Vito's over-under and Mike Feld over-under 67.5. We didn't do a whole number. I know we've done that in the past and we've gotten in trouble with our guests. They haven't really given us a formal answer. Mike Feld did, and he said over. He said over 67.5, and I kind of want to get your opinion on that really quick here, too.
Over, by far.
You think so?
I think
for sure now because of what's happened.
Yeah, mid-70s. I think they'll probably finish in the 70, 75 win category. I think that they're going to play hard all year with whoever, and that just is a testament to Ron Gardenhire and what he brings to the table, that he could take a collection of what many people will call 4A talent and get them to play hard and play right. And it's not also the Detroit Tigers doing, it is also a reflection on the American League. It just isn't that good right now, and the Tigers can take advantage of teams that are similar to them in that there's a bunch of clubs that are basically in tank mode and don't have a realistic chance of competing. So that is the case. You have to acknowledge it, that partly the success of the Tigers is due to them, but partly it's due to the fact that the American League Central
stinks,
the division stinks, and the whole American League right now just isn't really up to par, not playing the best brand of baseball. But Vito, let's look ahead a little bit. Some fans are a little bit concerned because the month of May does get a little bit challenging. I know you play Seattle again, and I know you go out to the West Coast, but a couple challenging series await the Detroit Tigers. It might be a tough week ahead for them.
Well, yeah, and you have Seattle, like you said, coming up again, and now on the road in Seattle. It's a tough place to hit, and if the Tigers hitters maybe, go down a little bit in production, which you have to expect because they've been so great of late, and it's kind of a collection of misfits. It might be hard to say a collection of misfits, but their lineup from top to bottom, and like Sunday's lineup, once again on Mother's Day, I said it to Mike Feld himself. Well, you know what? That was bad. That was AAA. Those were a bunch of 4A players, and Victor Martinez was batting third. Like, Victor Martinez 5 years ago maybe could bat third. Him batting third on Mother's Day, you don't want that to happen. James McCann batting cleanup, I believe he was on Mother's Day. Whenever you see that, the 3 and 4 in your lineup for the Tigers, that's not good. You're probably not going to hit and score many runs. So coming up and having to play Seattle again, it's going to be tough, but then you have to bring into account, too, that Robinson Cano, their all-star second baseman, probably their greatest player, maybe outside of James Paxton, but hitting-wise, positional player-wise, he is their best player, and then you got D. Gordon. But Cano now, being out injury-wise, is already on the 10-day disabled list, but now, did you hear the latest news regarding Robbie Cano?
What's the latest news?
Well, suspended 80 games. How about that? So drug violation, out 80 games, that's more than what? Well, half of the way now, that's a lot of this season. We're already, 40 games through, so he won't be back until after 120 games have been played this season by the M's. That might kill their chances completely of making the playoffs as at least a wild card team. So that's one of your good teams. You already noted, Doc, the American League is pretty much a stinko league right now as a whole. And now one of the better teams in that league, in the American League, is going without one of their major stars, if not their biggest star, the rest of the way, or for the majority of the remainder of this season. So losing Cano is hugely significant for the Mariners. They probably won't be able to recover from that. And I was talking to my brother earlier before this recording, Doc. The M's never have luck, it seems like, on their side. They never catch the lucky break. They always have something working against them. And the latest thing is Robinson Cano being suspended 80 games. Robbie Cano, don't you know, out 80 games now with that suspension, already was hurt on the 10-day disabled list, as I noted already. So missing him now for all these games, Mariners probably won't recover. So maybe it helps out the Tigers a little bit. They're playing hot going into Seattle, but still a very tough place to play for hitters. Pitching-wise, the pitchers might look pretty darn good there. And the pitchers really, all around the rotation-wise, at least, Doc, you have 3 arms that have really looked good of late. Matthew Boyd, Francisco Liriano, Mike Fiers Monday night, shutting down the Indians for the most part. So he looked fairly dominant. You have him, Liriano, Boyd. Fulmer can look dominant. We know he's the most dominant, talent-wise, pitcher of this rotation and the ace of the Tigers rotation this year and probably for the foreseeable future. So the rotation, speaking of that specifically, Doc, the rotation is overachieved. Liriano, Fiers probably won't keep it up, but I think you found something with Matthew Boyd. I think he's a lefty to build around for the future, and he makes that David Price trade to the Blue Jays look really good, especially when you have to take into account that Daniel Norris is on the shelf for the majority of the rest of the season and really hasn't looked like the prize piece of that trade with the Blue Jays that involved David Price. So at least you got Matt Boyd to make that trade package look pretty good. Now, and if Norris becomes something moving forward, gets past this injury, becomes something next year, let's say, he's still young, can still become something, and then you have him and Boyd in that Tigers rotation for the future for the next 3 to 5 years, that's a really good rotation to build around for the future, too.
All right, hit me with the rest of Vito's notebook. What are the major stories that you've been peeking into this week before we get out of here?
Right-hander Jordan Zimmermann. How about this? His fielding independent pitching is the best it's been since he joined the Tigers in 2016. Through 7 starts going into Tuesday's recording, it sits at 4.04, which takes out all the defensive mishaps in your defense and how poor it might be, and just really accounts for what the pitcher truly controls, which is the strikeouts and stuff like that, those kind of stats. So his fielding independent pitching fielding independent pitching stat is 4.04, the best it's been since he joined the Tigers in 2016. And last season, by the way, his FIP was mighty bad. It was 5.18 in 29 starts. So 5.18 FIP last season is what Jordan Zimmermann recorded. That ain't good whatsoever. Any way you slice it, that is not good whatsoever, Doc. So there was a stat right there about Jordan Zimmermann. One that I already kind of brought up regarding John Hicks. 5 multi-hit games in May. Had none of those type of games in April. Leonys Martin, another guy on the shelf. Castellanos, Leonys Martin's on the shelf. Daniel Norris is on the shelf. All these guys. Jordan Zimmermann, who already was talked about here, is on the shelf. All these guys at least on the 10-day DL. Leonys Martin as well, currently on the 10-day DL with the left hamstring strain. He already has logged as many plate appearances this year, Doc, as he did all of last year with a .138. And Martin spent last season with the Mariners and Chicago Cubs, with whom he recorded a WAR of 0. It was a WAR of 0 last year, according to BaseballReference.com from Leonys Martin. A bargain pickup for the Tigers at this point, as in stark contrast, through 32 games with the Old English D this season, he has posted a WAR of a 1, according to BaseballReference.com. His OPS as well sits this season at .863. Prior to 2018, the best OPS a 30-year-old had recorded during a season in which he played in over 100 games came in 2013 with the Tejas Rangers. And his OPS that season was only .698. Not that good right there from Leonys. So his OPS right now, .863. If he keeps that up, the Tigers got a mighty big bargain. So that could be the case. Alavila may be a really good pickup there, getting Leonys Martin, Doc.
Great notebook on the Detroit Tigers. Any national news that caught your attention outside of Robinson Cano?
Well, the legalization of sports gambling, we already touched upon that. One other big note about the Tigers for, my Tigers notebook this week. Nicholas Castellanos is on pace for career highs in batting average, on-base percentage, slugging, and on-base plus slugging percentage. OPS, that is, as I commonly refer to it as such, and everybody does. He's hitting .326 with a .386 OBP. That's extremely high, and unlike his career norms, that's a big one to note. .386 on-base percentage, .500 slugging, .886 OPS. Career highs that could make him an all-star for the first time in his big league career.
Great stuff, Vito. One other note, one other wrinkle. Justin Verlander did weigh in and kind of drew some controversy in that he kind of tweeted out when Robinson Cano was suspended. He tweeted out 3, ... 2, ... 1, ... Here come the excuses. And a lot of people in Detroit kind of recognize and nationally that, hey, Justin Verlander sounds a little bit hypocritical in that back in 2013, Justin Verlander was once a teammate of Johnny Peralta, who got suspended, and people looked up the tweet because on Twitter, everything lives forever. And back then in 2013, he tweeted out, well, people make mistakes, I'm going to stick by my teammate, and things like that. So people have called out Justin for kind of jumping down the throat of Robinson Cano. And more will come out. People have recognized that, this substance that he said he used for a medical illness potentially could have also been used to mask another agent. So it has been alleged that Robinson Cano used something to cover up the use of performance-enhancing substances. Now he's suspended, and guess what it's going to cost him? Let me tell you this. Over-under, do you think it's going to cost him $15 million over-under for this transgression?
Well, if you told me 14.5, I would take the over. I'm going to still take the over. I think you're leaning towards that, no?
11.
Not quite?
His 80 games that he's going to miss out are going to cost him around $11.5 million.
And do I care? Nope, not when he's making all that money with the Mariners. So I don't think he needs that paycheck for a while. He'll be all right without that paycheck for the duration of that suspension.
80 games, so that's just the way it is.
You do it, you got to pay the consequences, don't you? I just hope for Justin Verlander's sake. He's been hyper, ultra critical of all these guys that have been suspended because of PED usage or any kind of drug violation, drug usage, Doc. Well, if it ever comes out that he did something, think about this. If he ever gets suspended, or how hypocritical would it look for him if it comes out that he gets suspended for PED usage? It would look horrible.
People are doubting his performance now that he's got Cy Young numbers. And
yeah,
now he's elevated
34, 35, so remember that too.
Are you trusting Justin Verlander and that he's all natural, or are you starting to be a little skeptical because his numbers are a little bit out there, and it's a little bit of an outlier for a guy that age performing that well. You concerned at all that maybe there's something nefarious is going on, or you believe that Justin Verlander is playing legit and is clean?
Nothing nefarious. I'm going to say example A is Nolan Ryan. He's a Nolan Ryan-esque arm that can pitch forever. I think into his 40s. If he stays relatively healthy, he'll be all right. So I don't think he's using drugs. But once again, if it's found out that he did use PEDs at any point in his career, think about how hypocritical it would look for Justin Verlander when he's calling out Robinson, Cano, all these other guys for, having tainted legacies now, let's say. And Cano, he does. I mean, this is a guy that is on pace still, Doc, by the way, for 3,000 hits. So if he gets to 3,000, is he a Hall of Famer?
Ooh.
Right? There's a big discussion piece right there, too.
Okay, we'll look into that. A tease maybe for future editions of this podcast. All right, we got to get out of here. Time's up on this episode, this fine recording. Thanks to Mike Feld for joining us. I can't wait to watch the Detroit Tigers and see if maybe they can, continue the climb to 500 and maybe above.
Keep climbing the mountain, Tigers. Adios.